Alright guys, so this video is going to be over photosynthesis and cellular respiration. We're just going to do a quick review right now. Living organisms, we know that if it has a nucleus, we know it's a eukaryote. If it has organelles, we know it is a eukaryote. If it's a eukaryote, then you have four options. It could either be an animal cell or an animal, okay, a fungus, a plant, or a protist. Okay, animals and plants, we know that they're similar, but they do have their differences when it comes to their cells and how they actually, what structures they have. Plant cells have three big differences, which are the cell wall, the chloroplast, and the large central vacuole. Okay, so those are eukaryotes. Prokaryotes are bacteria, eubacteria, which is just true bacteria, and then archaebacteria, which lives in very extreme environments. Prokaryotes, remember, they don't have a nucleus, they don't have any organelles. They do have ribosomes because they gotta make proteins, remember that. But ribosomes are just structures, they're not actual organelles. Okay, the cell membrane, remember, that controls what goes in and out of our cells. Chloroplast is responsible for what we're going to talk about today, for capturing sunlight and producing glucose in plants. Okay, mitochondria is going to convert that glucose that's made in photosynthesis into ATP, which is the energy that we're able to use. Okay, the nucleus controls everything in the cell. It contains DNA, which holds the genetic information that determines the traits that we show. Okay, the physical characteristics. The cytoplasm is the gel that keeps inside the cell, that keeps everything together. That in our cells that we made is the gel that's there. Okay. Now photosynthesis, remember, that is the process of making glucose. Okay, and the ones that make glucose are autotrophs. They're the ones that grab the sunlight, convert it into glucose or chemical energy. Okay, and they do that by using carbon dioxide and water. Okay, the equation for photosynthesis, which you should feel very comfortable looking at and understanding it, is CO2 plus water plus light energy, which is sunlight, yields, that's what the arrow represents, glucose and oxygen. The equation here is actually already balanced. Okay, so you can see that it has 6 CO2, 6 waters, sunlight, and it produces one glucose molecule and six oxygens. Okay, the reactants and products, you need to be able to identify both. The reactants of photosynthesis are carbon dioxide, water, and light energy. That's what goes into the reaction. The products, which is what comes out of the reaction, is glucose, sugar, and oxygen. Glucose is just sugar. That's the reason it's in parentheses. All right. So again, make sure you're able to identify both of those. Now, this process happens in the chloroplast. We talked about the chloroplast, and the chloroplast is green because it has chlorophyll. That's the pigment that's there. Now, inside the chloroplast is the structures called thylakoids. These are the pancake structures that you see here. Okay, those are the thylakoids, and that's where photosynthesis actually happens. Now, photosynthesis is divided into two reactions. One of them happens in the thylakoids, the other one happens in the stroma. Okay, and we'll go into more detail there. We'll go into more detail in a couple of minutes, or as soon as we explain these two reactions. Okay, light independent reactions. Remember, they are light dependent reactions. They depend on light, so they need light, and this happens in the thylakoids. And you can see, if we split this chloroplast that's here into two, okay, if I'm able to do that, give me 1 second. Right here, okay. Then this is light dependent reactions. This is light independent reactions. Okay, that's where those happen. Now, light dependent reactions happen in the thylakoids. Water is absorbed, and you can see there's a little arrow right here, right? So water is going in, and then goes in through the roots. Okay, let me put on all the notes. It goes in through the roots. It reaches the leaves, goes into the thylakoids. Okay, and there's the water, goes in. The other thing that comes in is light. Light hits the thylakoids, and when the light hits the water in the thylakoids, it splits the water, and now it releases the O2 that was in that water molecule, or the oxygen that's in that water molecule. All the hydrogen stay in the thylakoid, okay, and they eventually get converted into what we know as ATP, and this other little molecule that's called NADPH2, which is just a carrier molecule. Okay, but again, light dependent reaction only means is that they require light, okay, in order for them to happen. And the reason they require light is because the water that's coming into the chloroplast, okay, the water that's coming into the chloroplast needs to be split, and in order for it to be split, the light needs to come into the thylakoid so the O2 can leave the thylakoid or the chloroplast. Okay, all right, so that's light dependent. Let me go through all the notes here. And then light independent happens on the other half. It happens in the stroma, and that's where carbon dioxide from the atmosphere enters the chloroplast. Okay, and the NADPH brings all those hydrogens, and the CO2 combines with the hydrogens with the help of ATP, which is the energy to produce glucose. Okay. Now, in short, I'm going to use, or just to summarize it, I'm going to use this picture. If we divide the chloroplast in two, this is light dependent reaction, this is light independent. Okay. In light dependent, light comes in, remember it's dependent on the light, so light comes in and splits the water that comes into the chloroplast, okay, splits it so that it can release the O2. Okay, let me use another color. So it can release O2 or oxygen. Once that's done, then CO2 comes into the chloroplast, and the ATP and the hydrogens that were left in the thylakoids come into the Calvin cycle and produce sugar. Okay, so you can see here, these are the reactants. This is what's coming in. Okay, reactants. These are the products. Okay, in blue. O2 and sugar are produced by putting CO2 and water and light into the chloroplast. Okay, so products and reactants. That's photosynthesis. Okay, the production of sugar by autotrophs in the chloroplast by using CO2 and water and the sunlight. Okay, now that glucose that's made, well, that glucose now it's going to be used by other organisms or by organisms, the same organism actually, it could be used by plants, okay, in order to make ATP. And ATP, remember that it's the only energy that we're able to use. And all cellular respiration is just the reverse, is the reverse equation of what photosynthesis actually is, okay? That is all it is. And you can see it there. So the formula for photosynthesis is CO2 plus water plus sunlight, and that gives us glucose and oxygen. Well, here in cellular respiration, we use glucose and oxygen produced during photosynthesis to produce carbon dioxide and water plus the energy that we need, okay, which is ATP. Now, cellular respiration is divided into three steps: glycolysis, which happens in the cytoplasm; the Krebs cycle, which happens in the mitochondria; and the electron transport chain, which happens in the membranes of the mitochondria. Okay, so glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm, and this is where the glucose is actually split. That's what glycolysis is. So just remember that from glycolysis. Glycolysis is the splitting of glucose into 2-pyruvates, okay, or into pyruvate. Now, you can see that here in the picture. This is glycolysis right here. It happens in the cytoplasm. We're not in the mitochondria yet. This is just in the cytoplasm. Glycolysis splits glucose into pyruvates, and when it does that, it actually produces ATP molecules. Okay, so it produces 2 ATP molecules. After glucose is split, then that pyruvate that's here goes into the mitochondria. Okay, and the Krebs cycle happens, or the citric acid cycle happens. Okay, and during this step, then CO2 is released from the mitochondria. Okay, so again, the first thing that happens is glycolysis, and this right here, give me 1 second, okay, releases H2O. Okay, this right here releases CO2. Okay, CO2. Now, after the pyruvate gets to the citric acid cycle, then another 2 more molecules of ATP are produced. Okay? Once that happened, then all the other electrons that were left from the citric acid cycle go to the electron transport chain, and 32 ATP molecules of it, 34 ATP molecules are formed. Okay? So that gives you a total of 38 molecules of ATP, but since 2 molecules are used to make the process happen, then you end up with 36 ATP total molecules being produced. Okay, and these are your products. If you look at the equation we just talked about, okay, glucose and oxygen, okay, so it would be C6H12O6 plus O2, which is oxygen, go in to the process, and then H2O plus CO2 plus 36 ATP are produced during the process. Okay? Again, this is just cellular respiration. This is what happens when glucose is made and is introduced to the cell. Okay? Photosynthesis changes sunlight into chemical energy, which is glucose. Then the mitochondria changes that glucose into ATP, which is the energy that we need. Okay. In photosynthesis, plants use carbon dioxide and water plus sunlight, and they produce glucose and oxygen. In cellular respiration, that same glucose and oxygen is used, and the mitochondria produces the water, CO2, and the 36 ATP that we need in order to in order for all the functions to happen inside of our bodies. Okay, I'm going to make this video. I'm going to keep going with the video because I only got a couple more things to talk about. And all that is give me 1 second. All that is what affects photosynthesis. We did a lab over this, so you should feel very comfortable while we're going through the slides. Okay, all the 3 things that we talked about was light intensity, carbon dioxide, and temperature. Light intensity, okay, as the light increases, okay, if it gets too hot or if there's too much light, then you can denature the chlorophyll. And if that happens, then you're actually denaturing the chloroplast and nothing's going to happen. Okay. Yes, more light you increase, you're going to increase the photosynthetic rate, but eventually you're going to be making so much ATP or so much, you're going to have so many hydrogens, okay, but the Calvin cycle is not going to be able to keep up, okay. So yes, the light intensity increases the rate, but only to a point. After a point, then it's going to start damaging the actual chloroplast and making that chloroplast ineffective. Okay, and you can see that. Okay, as you increase the light, it's going to go up, but then it's going to level off, and eventually it can come down by because it's damaging the chloroplast. Okay, temperature, same thing. Okay, light independent reactions are affected by temperature because enzymes are the ones that are making this reaction happen. So we know that enzymes are affected by temperature. So if you increase the temperature after that optimal temperature, which is right here, okay, you see the big drop off. If you lower it, then you can see how it's dropping off, and eventually it's going to denature and it's not going to function the way you should. Okay. Again, those are the factors that impact photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide, of course, I mentioned earlier, using the graph for the light intensity, but as it increases, okay, you can see that eventually it levels off and nothing's going to, the rate is not going to be able to increase anymore, okay? All right, I hope this helped. Watch your notes, watch your other videos that are posted, use other resources, use your notes, and if you need any help, please let me know.